Welcome to The Culture. We rest at the pulse of the community, providing all things news, music, fashion, events, and everything that we talk about in between. It's a lifestyle. We are The Culture. Hi, and welcome to another edition of The Culture. We're at the top of the year. So happy to be with you. And as always, it's our friend to the show, Senator Dwight Bullard. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy New Year, and thanks for having me, Jessica. Always good to be on The Culture.
Yes, because we do it for the culture, by the culture, to the culture. Okay, let me come back. Sir, so much is going on in the news world right now. A lot of things happened 2 days ago on January the 6th. Can you please unpack for us what was supposed to happen with the confirmation or certification?
Yeah. I mean, do you want the good news or the crazy news first? It's really
just give me the good first, and then we can get all into the cray-cray part.
Yeah, so big shout out to your old hometown of Atlanta. Once again, they came through with flying colors to save democracy. For those who don't know, there was a series, two very important U.S. Senate elections, both happening in Georgia, stemming from the November election. So as it stands right now, I mean, subject to a recount, of course, but as it stands right now, Reverend Raphael Warnock, who will not have a recount, defeated incumbent Senator Kelly Loeffler, and John Ossoff defeated incumbent Senator Perdue in the state of Georgia. Again, much to my delight, but very much because of the efforts of, just an abundance of Black organizing, folks like Stacey Abrams, Nsé Ufot, and Mary Hooks, who are some dynamic women, Latasha Brown with Black Voters Matter, who are just, doing what Black women have done since the beginning of time, which is save the world. And so it's important for us to kind of acknowledge, their work, the hundreds of organizers they had on the ground who are, in the face of a pandemic, knocking on doors and talking to people because they knew the importance of this election. And it was a razor thin margin. In the case of Reverend Warnock, he won by 1 percentage point. But in the state of Georgia, in order to get a recount, you have to be within 0.5%. So in the other race between John Ossoff and Senator Perdue, that was just under 0.5%. And so that one will be likely be a statewide recount, but statewide recounts don't rarely overturn elections, especially considering that, many of the votes that came in late on the 5th, early morning on the 6th were from counties like Fulton County and DeKalb County, Decatur County, where, you have the larger state's population, and 90% of those votes were going towards Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff.
Nice. Yeah. You mentioned that those ladies were doing things, and collectively they were able to bring victory.
Yes.
What do you think they did differently, or was it just that what made this election so much greater for all of the parties involved?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the nature of how the media viewed Georgia. Georgia had not been blue since the Clinton election back in '92. So a lot of the South oftentimes gets kind of put on the shelf during presidential elections, like, well, circumstances and dynamics in those states will prevent them from becoming blue. What folks in the organizing realm recognize is that, if you take a congressional district or a state senate district that is occupied by a Black person, oftentimes the Black population in that district is just over about 30%. Most people, universally recognize that 30 to 35% of a Black electorate will allow a black candidate to fight for that. And when you think about the South, most Southern states are like that. They have these, historically large black populations that that are oftentimes not talked to. And so what those women did was recognize that if you take Atlanta, being the mecca of black people in the South, in the country, however you want to view it, and then you factor in places like Augusta, Albany, Savannah, Macon, where you go through these towns, you've driven through them on your way, driving from, whether it's driving through A&T through Georgia, going to wherever, or coming up from FAM, going through Georgia, that there's this concentration of black people that, because they're rural in nature, are there, but oftentimes unfortunately forgotten. And so what these women did was recognize that we can't forget folks in places like Americus, Georgia, or Omega, Georgia, or some of these like small towns. And that when you sew all those votes together, when you're talking to people on one accord about why we as a community need to vote as a block, you get the outcome that you got on Tuesday, where you just have, it's a powerful thing when black people speak with one voice.
I was so happy to win.
Yeah.
I mean, the election results were excellent. And then just a couple of hours of me just glorifying in all of the goodness that was going on in Georgia and watching the memes and all of these things. You had what was originally classified as protesters storm the U.S. Capitol, but they have later to describe it as not protesters. But can you tell it just unpack that whole situation?
Yeah. So let's be clear. If you look up the textbook definition of insurrection, and it's a term that you remember reading in your history book from places like the American Revolution or the War of 1812 or even the Civil War, you've heard the term applied, insurrection, where folks from who are from the country kind of implode on themselves and try to take over government, or you hear the news and you hear the term coup or attempted coup, and we always apply those to other countries, thinking that it can't apply to us. And that's ultimately what you saw yesterday. I mean, just to give you context, no mass force has breached the US Capitol since 1814. People need to understand that, right? Like, no entity, foreign or domestic, has en masse overtaken the US Capitol in 207 years. And that's what took place yesterday. So people need to be rightfully alarmed about the ease that it took them to get there. But I think Black people especially are alarmed about the police reaction to it, right? Because a lot of the conversation that we had sitting in our homes, because all of us collectively were like, that is let's be blunt, that's the whitest thing we've seen in a long time. That taking place. So Black Twitter and everybody else is having this conversation about, couldn't have been us, right? And we know that because we just experienced that all summer, with the protests related to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, where if we were occupying a street for too long, if we were out past curfew, if we were standing on the wrong sidewalk, we were, scenario after scenario, we were met with violent force, mass arrest. We're talking tear gas, rubber bullets, real bullets, and all the things for fighting for Black lives, for asking, we were shot at for asking people not to shoot at us, right? And so the idea of a force being able to go into the Capitol, go into the Senate floor, go into the House floor, sit inside the Speaker's office and put their feet up on the desk, steal things, steal mail, steal property from the US Capitol, and then in essence, be escorted out. you know, of the Capitol, right? Like, almost like, could you please leave? Like, we're not gonna do anything to do anything, but but we just need you all to kind of like walk it back. And so the idea that the Capitol was occupied for a couple of hours, um, all while they're trying to certify this election, and you brought that up at the beginning, but the exercise that was taking place is something that has happened. At this point, there have been 59 presidential elections, and that process that you saw play out um, is something that we've never really put on the news. No one really cared about the certification of the Electoral College because it was what it was. Even with Bush v. Gore and the controversy around that, no one took the time to watch it play out on CNN or MSNBC. But you had a situation in which members of the U.S. Congress, members of the U.S. Senate were doing their jobs, and you had people from the United States walk into the Capitol building with violence, choosing violence that day. They busted windows, kicked in doors, put everybody at risk. I mean, I was listening to Cori Bush, Representative Cori Bush, who's newly elected from St. Louis, a sister who was newly elected from St. Louis, who was at the Ferguson uprising in Ferguson, Missouri. And, what she had shared was she was like, she's like, I remember, walking down, the middle of a street and having tear gas lobbed at me by police for walking down the middle of a street with my hands held up. And she said the idea that myself and my staff were at risk of violence by other people, and that there seemed to be no urgency around protecting them, just really shook her to her core. Because, she's seen the worst of American state violence in her own life and used that as a catalyst to go to Congress to try and change those laws. And the idea that while she's working her job, that her life was potentially in danger. And we say in danger, they found no less than 3 explosive devices yesterday. There were several people in that mob that were armed with knives and guns as they're walking through the Capitol. Members of Congress had to shelter in place. My brother-in-law, who is a member of the Capitol Police and, works close detail, was in an undisclosed location for hours. My sister was losing her mind because she didn't know where her husband was. So, this is real for real people. If you've ever been to the Capitol, those people work every day, whether it's the vendor, the person who's, selling souvenirs, or the person who sweeps the floor, that those people were exposed to the worst kind of American violence, and don't deserve that. And I think it's unfortunate that it was just so blasé that was happening, and nobody, no one's choosing to create an accountability for that, especially compares to what we experience as Black people. We got tear gas just outside the White House, this summer, just so Donald Trump could pose with a Bible, right? So it's those kinds of things that are real problematic.
Will there be any accountability for what happened?
Well, according to reports, the FBI are now looking for people that were, we're out there. They're asking other folks to identify, who these people were, like the people that were standing or reaching the place or stealing the podium. These are all pictures that float around the internet. But again, for people of color, Black people especially, it's just like it's a shake your head moment, because it's like we don't get that pass. You have the state of Florida, for instance, trying to pass a law to expand stand your ground to anticipate looting. You understand what I'm saying? Like, they want to expand stand your ground so that if someone thinks you're about to break into a Target, they can shoot you. While the United States Capitol had 500 people just walking through it indiscriminately, no mask on, spreading COVID, doing whatever. And now you're saying, and when we think, especially when we think about historically Black people in the FBI, it's like, you need our help to identify? Like, like it was like, I don't believe Fred Hampton and Louis, Huey Newton got that same energy to help identify, when Bobby Seale walks into the California State Assembly, rightfully carrying a firearm and is mass arrested with the Black Panthers in the late 60s. It wasn't a question of let him walk out, go back to Oakland, sit around for a few days, and then wonder who he was. It was, we dealt with that right then and right there, and he suffered the consequences, for committing a legal action at that time. But the idea that these folks, again, just got a free pass, it really is white privilege at its ultimate. For people who wonder what it is, like, what is this thing, white privilege, that you speak of? That's literally what you saw yesterday.
Isn't that a great example?
It's the best example. I mean, listen, I almost makes me want to go back in the classroom just so I could teach history all over again. Like, in case anyone needs to know, let me show you the CNN footage from January of 2021 so that you all can understand what white privilege looks like. This is it, and that was it.
They put out an article that juxtaposed the troopers, or I don't know if it was the National Guard or who it was, that were standing at the U.S. Capitol for Black Lives Matter protests. And then the next picture was all of Trump supporters hanging off the rafters, just wilding.
Scaling the side of a building. I mean, it. Like I was listening to Reverend Sharpton be interviewed yesterday, and he was like, we did a march on Washington this year or back in 2020, and we had to pull permits, we had to get all kinds of things. He's like, and they set up a whole parameter, to keep Black people that had no desire to overtake the Capitol in a box. He's like, they just kept us there. We did our speeches, we did our thing, but there were snipers on the roof. There were, paddy wagons ready. There was, everything in it about it. And one thing that I don't want people to miss is this was a planned pro-Trump rally that turned into them storming the Capitol. So the president himself, his son, Rudy Giuliani, all sat in front of these folks, and the president even said, you know what you need to do? You need to storm up Pennsylvania Avenue. And it's like, wait. You're urging these people to do these things. You know what I'm saying? Rudy Giuliani is sitting there talking about, you need to like it should be trial by violence, to overturn this election that was stolen from us. These are what people were saying just hours before. And then all of a sudden they do it and nothing. But again, Black folks show up to talk about I have a dream, and we got, 10,000 National Guard on the standby as we're saying the words peace and love over and over and over and over again, or talking about can you stop killing us? And you find new and creative ways, to impose violence on folks. It's just, it's mind-boggling that that kind of hypocrisy is allowed to kind of like fester, right? Because, here it is. I've told people in the past. I was like, I was born in Philly, and my mom was from South Carolina. That is 2 of the first 13 colonies, right? So I've, my people are from here, right? Like it's like been here, right? You know what I'm saying? Rooted in this American experiment, and I don't get the same level of treatment as some of these, folks. And we both try to claim that we're American citizens, and that's the inherent unfairness of this whole episode.
Ooh, you've said a lot. You have said a lot and unpacked it for us. But then let's go on. They stopped, but then the show continued.
Absolutely. So around midnight or midnight this morning, last night, depending on who you ask, they certified uh, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as president and vice president of the United States. So the show must go on. I shout out to Joanne Reed, and if you haven't listened to Joanne Reed's commentary over the last 24 hours, she had all the fire and brimstone of a Baptist preacher about how crazy this is. And the reason I bring her up is because she's like, I'm a nerd about this ceremonial stuff. He's like, but the idea of, these people who literally were stoking these flames of racism and violence, getting to stand up on the Senate floor that had just been occupied by random people a few hours before, and then, give these pontifications and speeches about, how great America is and how beloved this system is. And, we all must wrap our arms around the new president and vice president. These are folks that were literally trying to delegitimize the election, say the election was stolen, when everyone was like, Donald Trump is crazy. No, he's not crazy. He's not, he's not. He's eccentric. He's the duly elected president. So we have to give. It's like, no, this dude's been inciting violence since Charlottesville in 2017. And now, what was tiki torches 4 years ago turned into those same individuals, or the same kind of individuals, taking over the U.S. Capitol, and you all are complicit in that. And it bothers me, just like it bothered Joanne Reed, that there's no self-accountability. Like, you know what I mean? Like, especially when we saw you do it, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's videotape. Like, we got receipts that you all said these things. And then you just like, on to the next one. It's a terrible thing that happened. It's just like going back, this is the first time it's happened in 207 years. So something that has not happened in 2 centuries happened on your watch. And all you have is like jokes and platitudes towards your fellow colleagues about, oh, well, we got a new president. Let's keep the ball rolling. I agree with folks who've been calling for the resignation of those 12 senators that started this whole thing, that tried to delegitimize that. There are probably 100 members of the House of Representatives, again, that protest, call themselves protesting the election, and all of them, I know they won't, but they all need to step down. Like, all of them need to say, I messed up and I shouldn't be doing this, because I'm not working in the best interest of of this country. So that's my feeling.
Do you think anything would have changed if Trump would have requested for everyone to stop? If he would have tweeted it out?
If he meant it, maybe, but he's a he's a sociopath. I mean, I'm not saying that to be facetious. I'm saying that because countless mental health professionals have recognized that Trump, since his election, has exhibited continuous episodes of sociopathic behavior. And so, when you give a sociopath the keys to your car, you know what I'm saying, you can't expect that car to come back in one piece. Like, it just doesn't work that way, right? And that's, in essence, what this country did, was they turned over their keys to a complete sociopath, and we got what we got.
Right.
And the idea that people are just like, okay with it, is like, he's a dangerous individual. People have literally died. There was a study that said 30,000 COVID cases and 700 deaths are attributed to his rallies during the 2020 election cycle. People have literally died because this man didn't want to, follow any rules or go or be checked by people. So, I mean, I I just can't. I can't with a level of respect look in the eyes of somebody who was actively complicit in some of the stuff that happened and what ultimately led to yesterday.
But then you have two corporations and possibly a sister that told him no. They stopped his posting on Facebook. I believe they did the same thing and requested for Twitter or something
Yeah,
with Instagram.
yeah. Mark Zuckerberg has basically suspended Trump's uh, platform on those social media platforms. But we're talking about somebody who's you know is going to go down in history books as the 45th president of the United States. So that means if Trump, when he leaves office, wants to get a show on Fox News, guess what? He's going to get a show on Fox News. If he wants to, you know, go back to doing The Apprentice again, somebody's going to end up giving this, you know, him a platform to espouse all his craziness, and that should be scary. That should be scary that he's going to be able to go on and stoke these flames if he so chooses to. I mean, I would hope that as a narcissist, that now that he's no longer president, that he would just go off and try to do something else to make money or rob people the way he's been robbing people all his life. But you give this dude a platform and put a microphone in his face, and there's no telling what's going to come out of his mouth.
To be continued.
To be continued.
Thank you, as always, for joining us today. And for those of you who are watching, if you want more, come on back at 6 o'clock, where we'll be on My 2 Cents, and we'll unpack that and so much more. We'll see you next time right here on The Culture.
The Culture is produced and owned by Hip Rock Star Media and cannot be reproduced or broadcast without written consent by Jessica Garrett Modkins. All rights reserved 2020.